Very good evening and welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna. Inamdar. MG Motor India, the British brand owned by China's largest car maker Shanghai Automotive, is in advanced talks with a homegrown $22 billion conglomerate JSW Group for a stake sale. With its foreign direct investment proposal with the government of India stuck, MG India has been relying on its parent company to keep its operations afloat. In fact, there have been several media reports of how MG Motors has been scrambling for funds for the last 1 year. So now this report has come up in the last 24 hours about how MG India is now in talks perhaps with JSW, who wants to get into the EV space. They've been saying that for a while. But what we're talking about today is not just this one particular deal. What is it telling us about two distinct situations that we're seeing in India today? One is the fate of Chinese-led investments into India. Clearly, after 2020 and geopolitical tensions between India and China, which started with skirmishes on the LAC, Chinese FDI into India has been blocked. Where does that leave Chinese-owned brands? Some Chinese-owned OEMs have already packed up their bags. Can any survive in this market? The other part of the story is not just about Chinese-led companies. It's also about the Indian automotive market, which is not a smooth ride for everyone. The list of multinational companies that have come into the Indian market, been very bullish, and then finally had to make a U-turn and go back home is fairly long, and that list has grown in the last 5 years. So how do you look at the MG strategy to survive in this kind of an environment? To speak on some of those factors, I'm joined today by Nikunj Sanghi, MD of JS Fourwheelmotors, Hormazd Sorabjee, editor of Autocar India, with me on the show today. I'm speaking with Ajay Dua, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and Gaurav Vangaal, Associate Director of S&P Global Mobility. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us this evening on the India Development Debate. Hormazd, let me begin with you. And of course, yesterday there were reports all across the media on this deal. Autocar did an excellent piece on the details of the deal. But, how do you look at it in perspective? Is this MG banking upon the Indian market or just scrambling to survive?
Well, I think, in fairness, if you look at it, I think MG so far has done everything right. The way they've launched the brand has been pretty successful. People were skeptical about it when they came in, launched first in 2019. That's all before COVID, the whole border clash, that sort of thing. And they really got off to a great start. I think really it was a copybook launch, if I might say so, that along with Kia. But clearly, I think, their foreign FDI proposals have been stuck. And to expand, they do need capital. That's not coming. I mean, there's not a yes, there's not a no, but it's just on pause. And I think that's, the reasons are pretty obvious. They've been surviving on ECBs from the parent company at maybe a loan at a very small interest rate. But honestly, to take that next step forward, they do need, fresh funding. And to be honest, I think this is the only way out for them. And I think what's happened or what's likely to happen with JSW is a great lifeline. And it will allow MG to kind of invest in a whole pipeline of products which they have ready, which they are unable to kind of make in the current plant. It can be expanded, but, it maxes out at around 120,000 capacity per annum. Right now, they're getting up to 80 and then they're pushing more. But clearly, it's just a short-term thing. So for the future, they need funding. They need a second plant eventually. That also has to happen. They can't do everything in this plant. This don't, if you remember, was a brownfield plant. They bought GM's existing plant, which was there after GM exited. And, so I think, this is the way to go. But I think MG has actually done a great job in this market. It's established itself as a strong brand. A lot of people don't see it as a Chinese brand. A lot of people know it. They still think it's a British. So, hats off to them the way they position
No,
the
but
brand.
Hormazd,
And
that's their marketing and positioning. But New Delhi knows it's a Chinese brand.
no, of course. I'm talking about how they've done in the market. So I'm talking about to the consumer. So they've done a good job there. Everyone knows, I mean, anyone, who follows this industry knows definitely it's Chinese. And that is fundamentally the problem. And that's going to be a problem for, not only automakers, but any Chinese company, given the current geopolitical tension that we are in the middle of.
I want to get a quick comment from Ajay Dua before I come to the rest of the auto experts on specifically this aspect. Because like I said, this entire story was also interesting for us to take up because it has two distinct perspectives on it. One is India's policy or what we're deciding to do with Chinese FDI. And the second is whether this is not a very easy market to survive for OEM. So I'll come to Mr. Dua on the first part of it, because like Hormazd correctly said, there is pain not just for an MG, but for other companies with Chinese antecedents at a time when our imports from China have not necessarily ceased or disappeared. But there seems to be a cherry picking in what we want to allow in or not. So for example, we ban a TikTok, we ban Chinese apps, and this whole situation over here. How do you see this progressing, and is this the right policy in your view?
Thank you, Tamanna, for having me on the show. I think we need to be very clear that there is no prohibition imposed under the FEMA upon investments or FDI flows from China. What the government has done is to have prescribed that it would be subject to a special clearance procedure. And that means the Ministry of Home Affairs would be looking at each proposal with a lens focused on security of the country. So it goes back to who owns the investment which is coming in, what kind of activities they are in globally. Is it owned by the PLA, for instance? There are companies in China which have in the past, including in the shipping line, they were clearly owned by government generals working for the PLA, etc. So obviously these generals were kind of dummies for the state-owned interests. Having said that, the question is, now will this company, SAIC owned, and SAIC, as we all know, is a state-owned company. Will the government of India, after the due scrutiny, clear it, impose certain conditions which may not have been worked out between the possible collaborators, JSW Group and SAIC? It will add, the predominant factor would be certainly security, but also the necessity of having in our automobile space a company like SAIC. And we must recall, Tamanna, that this company has been doing rather well. And in India, too, in the last year itself, it has grown its, the sales by almost 60%. And during the current year, it envisages an 80% rate of growth and has promised 9 new models to be launched between 2023 and 25, plus 5 EVs. And the EV model, ZS EV, which is now selling well in India, was actually well priced. It has been considered to be kind of taking care of what the requirements of the Indian customer are. Plus, they have also invested in at least 150 charger points. That means going back in the infrastructure space. So I think a wholesome view would be taken by the government, which is emphasizing the development of EVs. If with this proposal come knowledge the technology is something which is benign, I am sure the government could take a liberal view of the matter and grant it the requisite permission.
Right, and this seems a good way out. If the JSW deal, etc., goes through, they would have then an Indian partner who wants to come into the space. It's a win-win either way. Even though MG has grown exponentially, it still is, I believe, just about 2% in market share. And that brings me to the other part of this entire story. Nikunj Sanghi, it's a tough space. We've just been running the list of companies and multinationals that have exited India. And there seems to be a certain secret sauce to survive and succeed here. Why is it so difficult, and do you think MG has that recipe down?
So I think, like Hormazd said, and Mr. Ajay also said that MG has done all the right things when they came into the country. They have established a very strong brand, and more than the brand, I think they have established a very strong network of dealers. And those dealers are all aligned to what MG wants to deliver to the customer. So I think the first steps which are required for any automobile company to establish in India are the steps which MG has taken. And with an India partner coming in, if they are able to allay the fears of the government in terms of security concerns of the country, I think this brand is here to stay and will, once they get their complete range of vehicles, which they have promised to launched in India, I think they'll get the right numbers. See, to stay in India, you need to do a minimum number of numbers. If you're not doing those numbers, then it's difficult to sustain. The present numbers which MG Motors is doing is definitely not an optimal number which any manufacturer would like to do. So, but with the range coming in, I hope with the Indian partner coming in, they will have the right amount of funds and also the right amount of confidence with the government of India where they can launch the new models that they're talking about. Once done, then I think MG Motors is here for business and customers are looking forward to their expansion of range.
So they need to definitely rev up. It's a chicken and egg situation. Gaurav Vangaal, do you think they need money to increase their number of products, increase their reach into the Indian market, and that is what is a rare resource right now?
Tamanna, as everybody mentioned that they were very good in the past few years, and they have launched multiple products, and the pace of the launches were very good. Every year they were bringing some new models. But if you see the capacity utilization of the plant in 2022, it was 65%, and this year with the Comet they are going to touch 100%, and they are going to go above also. So what next? So when a strategy planner sits, they need to invest further. They need to continue the success for the next 5 years, 10 years. For that, they need investment. They need investments in the product. They need investments in the plants. So how they are going to get it done? It's very difficult right now because this is, as everybody mentioned, that there's a geopolitical issue, and we have seen discouraging policies from the government on this topic. So I think they need to find a way out of it, and JSW looks a very good way. As per the media reports, what they're citing right now, it's a 20%, but I think it should go up. If MG is looking for a serious partner and wanted to have a long-term relationship with India, I think they need to go till 50%. They need to dilute their equity by till 50%.
Interesting aspect there. Hormazd, you agree that this 10, 15 odd percent which is being reported is not going to be enough? MG will need a stable Indian anchor. And your take on JSW's EV dreams?
No, absolutely. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that SAIC might end up even being a minority partner, and we are seeing that happening. And clearly, I think they would be happy with that. Better, being minority than being stuck. I think JSW, we know, have had EV ambitions. In fact, they were, nearly picked up the Talegaon plant to go solo with their car venture, but that fell through at the last minute. I think clearly, this is a great opportunity for JSW, and I'm sure the company has ambitions, not just to be a minority partner. And as Gaurav said, I think it might even go to 51% or more, with the SAIC being a minority at the end. But I think the bottom line will be is the flow of products will finally come, and I think that's great for the consumer, because they do have some good products, some good EVs in the pipeline. I think just the more choice, the better for the consumer. And as you said, a lot of people have exited for various reasons, and that's really not good for consumer, because we've actually seen choice narrow down. It's limited. You had Ford go, you've had GM go, you've had Renault and Nissan not doing too much. Now they're coming in by 25 or so. So you've had a lot of players which really haven't let's say, launched models the way it should have, leaving consumers with actually very, very little choice in this market compared to other mature markets. So I think MG coming a stable company, however the shareholding structure is, I'm sure that they'll have to work out. But I think with a stable company, properly funded, a good pipeline of products, I think that should put the company on a solid path of growth.
You're saying that SAIC might not mind being a minority partner, or not, having the lion's share better than not being there at all. But remember, there is some geopolitics behind all of this. Would that be feasible? That is also a state-owned company at the end of the day. Is that their reason for being in India?
I don't think that's the reason. I mean, look, they're all over the world, and they are expanding. Clearly, they are an automotive company at the end. And if you see SAIC and the joint ventures they've had, they have some really good joint ventures with Volkswagen. They had some things with Ford. So it is fundamentally an automotive company. Yes, it is state-owned, because that's really a government policy in automotive. But I think, frankly, depending on how things go, I don't think our relations with China are going to improve in a hurry at all. In fact, they might even get worse. So who knows, how it goes. It just might trigger, more and more successive sale. And, you never know. I think most extreme situation would be that there would be really a minority or an exit, and have just a technical contract or collaboration to just give products to the Indian entity, which is something they could do. So who knows? This is all speculation. Actually, we really don't know the construct or what the discussion.
To be fair, we did reach out. We did reach out, and I want to make that clear. We did reach out to MG Motors. We asked for their comment and their participation in this show, and they've said they're going to take their time and think about it. But it would be nice to get some clarity on all of those many, as Hormazd said, speculations going right now. I want to come to the bigger picture here, and Gaurav, I'll return to you on this, on what is happening in the Indian OEM space, where you have a lot of new launches, you have new entrants, but a large number of exits as well. And even today, there are 2 or 3 players that continue to have a dominant share. Is that a sign of a market which is growing, yes, in numbers, but not maturing to that extent in terms of choice for the end consumer?
That's what concerns actually every analyst, that market share is quite skewed right now, and we are not seeing any new entrants coming into the Indian market. If you talk about 2014-15, we were looking that Chinese will enter into the market, but unfortunately they were not able to make it, and then GM and Ford both exited. Now, which brands are left all over the globe? We don't see, and we had an issue with Tesla also in the recent past, and we were waiting for the Tesla at one point of time. But yes, we don't see much of the new car players coming into the Indian market, and the market is going to remain in the same pie. And I think only 4 players or 5 players are going to enjoy it. That's Tata Motors, Mahindra, Maruti Suzuki, Toyota, and I think Renault Nissan has taken a lead recently. But yes, we are expecting something from Volkswagen also, if they wanted to expand their portfolio in Indian market. Otherwise, we don't see any new market entrants as of now.
I want to tie this in a bit with policy, with another piece of news, which I think we should comment on. Mr. Dua, I'll come to you on that. We have a FAME policy to encourage electric vehicles. Now, for the last several months, all the news about this policy has been the government taking a very close lens on the companies that have claimed subsidies under FAME and getting them audited independently to check if they are truly, sticking to the rules. They don't want cheap parts being brought all over and just assemble and say that, this is under FAME, because you want it a make in India kind of a situation. Do you think we're being too rigid, or is it fair at this point to push for, more and more cars in this market, in a growing market, on our terms policy-wise?
Tamanna, let me clarify that the FAME 2 scheme, under which the subsidy is being claimed, is largely by the two-wheeler industry. And the deviations from the prescribed norms which required production to take place in India has been by the many of the so-called fast-growing EV companies in the two-wheeler space, mobiles as well as scooters. I don't think the four-wheeler car industry has availed of much of the FAME subsidy. And I would say if a government has a program in place, which is Atmanirbharta, and this is an industry which is amenable to be progressed in India, maybe not the batteries as yet, but that's a worldwide issue. But the rest of the things probably can be done here, including the powertrain being assembled in India. If the two-wheeler industry makers, some rather reputed ones, have violated it, it would only straighten them if the scheme continues beyond 2024-25 when its current tenure ends. I think they are in a position to make amends, and because the market is huge for their product, two-wheelers and also the three-wheelers. But coming to what we're discussing, I don't think it's been in any manner discouraging for them. For them, it's the cost of the end product which continues to be a major constraint in popularizing four-wheeler EVs in the country. There's a world of a difference between an ordinary or say ICE vehicle and a corresponding capacity EV vehicle. We have to be able to address that. One way is, of course, addressing the battery issue, but there was also this issue of semiconductor availability, which had been inhibiting its growth. That's perhaps eased, but scaling up could help. Scaling up production could help reduce the price, and that is where needing more players in it and larger companies of India which have deeper pockets, certainly there would be a degree of monopsony if only 4 or 5 players are there. But I think going forward, once the batteries become cheaper, and as we all know, while lithium is the current favorite, the current option, we could see other options also emerging, including to start with sodium plus lithium batteries, and in course of time, the batteries could be entirely sodium, and given the price of sodium because of easy availability, the cost differential between the ICE vehicles and EVs could come down considerably.
Right. As we wrap up, Nikunj Sanghi, I think we should get the end passenger, end buyer point of view as well. When we're talking about all of these exits from India and how there are some brands, the favorites, the top, which actually work. Is that reflective of consumer choice and their mindset? Are Indian consumers not open to experimenting too much, or are they now more and more open to newer brands and newer products?
So I think Indian consumers have been fairly courageous in trying new brands and giving a chance to every brand, and specifically if the offering is good in terms of the product features and pricing. So the exit of two companies definitely was a setback. And I think it was a setback for the consumer because suddenly he finds that the valuation of his existing vehicle went down, and more than the valuation, he had concerns about how he's going to get the vehicles serviced, availability of spares, availability of service centers. So I think it was a very big setback to the Indian consumers when the plug was pulled by two major brands in India. And because of that, I think the consumer is being a little cautious. But otherwise, I think the consumer is excited about trying new products, new brands. The consumer is also excited about the choices that he has. So the Indian market is huge. The pie is large enough for everybody to take a share. But to be fair to the Indian consumer, and I would also say to the dealers who make such huge investments in these brands, the longevity of the brand is extremely important to get the trust of the consumer. And I think somewhere all multinationals who are looking at India as a very huge market, a huge potential market, they will need to address the issue of the longevity of the brand and the serviceability of their vehicles, availability of spares. Once that is done and dusted, I'm sure they have a huge opportunity in the Indian market.
Fair point. If the perception goes out that a big brand, a multinational brand, might not stick around for more than 3, 4, 5 years, if the going gets tough, there is no reason for the Indian consumer to trust in them either. So a lot of aspects we've covered there on this story. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening on the India Development Debate. We'll take a very short break at this point, but we're back with a lot more.